Hi everyone and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where three Pro Tools experts and Avid instructors discuss, demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put to the community in Avid's official Facebook support forum. I'm your host Dave Phillips, lecturer for Point Blank in the UK, and with me as ever are Anders Motz from Tonkraftwerk in Austria.
Hello.
And Andy Hagerman from Avid, and he's over in Tokyo. Hi Andy.
How you doing?
In today's episode, we're continuing to look at Darren's question about sharing files. And his question was this. Hey all, I'm wondering if my raw drum tracks I'm sending to my Guitar Buddy are affected by plugins on the channel. To send the tracks, you have to consolidate, and then you get a message that is rendering the selected tracks. Then you hit Control-Shift-K, choose where to send them, and then drop them into WeTransfer. I'm hoping that my recipient is getting raw, dry, untreated drum tracks. Is there any thoughts on this? And in last week's episode, we discussed a couple of basic ways of being able to consolidate and send tracks over, and a couple of considerations as well. And then in this episode, we're going to bring the clever, and we're going to talk about some more nuanced ways of being able to share sessions and files with each other that might be a little bit more appropriate for some people's desires and workflows. So now, when we were talking about this before the episode filming, I was thinking that I might just send the session to somebody. If I was doing this, I might just send the session. If I had a whole bunch of edits, so I didn't have a complete drum track, everything was edited. Say I'd done some beat detectiving, and everything was sliced up and cross-faded and prepared to play, but wasn't actually consolidated into a main file. But I wasn't prepared to do that yet anyway. I might send them the session, and then they could just import the session data and import the tracks into the session that they were working on, and hopefully that would be okay. But then Anders and Andy shot me down in flames and told me how much of an idiot I was.
No.
And they're gonna tell us why.
Okay, we did.
They're going to tell us a better way.
No, but I mean, that's assuming that your buddy has Pro Tools, first off, which is, of course, a fair assumption because all clever guys do. But the other thing is you might not want to send him all of your sessions because of maybe it's a session with multiple hundreds of tracks or whatever.
File size is definitely a consideration for sure.
Right. Or maybe you don't want to for some reasons. I mean, I would happily send you all of my sessions, Dave or Andy, but there are some people that I don't want to send my sessions to. I don't want to give away some secrets or give them access to all of the recordings that have been done or all it takes. So a much better way to do this would be to select your drum tracks again and go into the file, export selected tracks.
So Andy can show this, right?
Yeah. So I've mocked up a little something here. A little something. So what I've got here is a bunch of vocals.
I love New York, Andy.
Little something. I have no idea where that's from. So I've got a vocal sub. So all my yellow vocal tracks are subbed over here. I've got my drum tracks that are subbed together, and you can see that there's some editing, and then I've got basically everything else, which is I put into a strings sub, and then I've got an effects track, which is just some effect. Now let's assume that we don't worry about reverb or the click or the master fader. In this scenario, the person was talking about drums. So let's assume, and because this happens all the time, where I'm going to send a session over to somebody and I want them to work on the drums, but nothing else. And you know, sending them everything else might not be appropriate. But let's say that I want to figure out a way to give them a stem of my vocals, just one single track in my session, a stem of my strings and a stem of my effects, and then I want to give them all of the drum tracks with the drum sub. And so they can do the work on the drums, but they can hear everything else in context. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's totally fair. I do that.
I do this all the time. And the first thing that I'm going to do, and both of you guys keep me honest, is what I'll do is I'll commit my other stems. So I've got this Vox sub, I've got this string sub, I've got the effects sub, and we'll just leave the reverb and all that stuff alone. Just for fun, I will go ahead and make a selection here on all these tracks. So you can see I've got a selected area on there. You'll see why in just a second. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll commit these. And we talked in the last episode the difference between commit and bounce, but in this case we are going to commit because we want it to be in a session as a track. So we'll go ahead and we will commit these tracks. On the selected,
I'd love to highlight that we're committing on an aux track.
Oh yeah, it's the greatest thing in the world.
This is cool.
The coolest thing is freezing on an aux track, and you see the little audio waveform. It's awesome. And we'll go ahead and consolidate these because all we want is just one unedited. Because maybe Anders has a special editing technique, and maybe he doesn't want to show it to you. And that's fine. Now, a lot of people are like that. I'm not. But maybe
no.
That's fine.
No, it's not like we have a YouTube show that goes into deep technique every week, and we're on the 58th episode.
So
we don't like to
we'll
share
consolidate this. We're going to render all this stuff because there's let's make life easy. We are going to copy the sends because maybe it's going to some effects or whatever. And on these other tracks, let's go ahead and make them inactive, but we won't hide them so you can see them side by side. We'll do it offline because we can, and that's fine. And it's going to do its thing. Somebody tell a joke.
You still have the hide and make inactive, at least on my screen.
Oh, did I have hide and make inactive?
Yeah, but no. Maybe it's just Zoom not updating.
Hold on. I'll try it one more time.
No. That might be a video glitch. So let's see what you get.
So make inactive. So make it active is what I have now. I'm for sure I've got that. So I just restarted it.
So while you're rendering this, Andy, of course, a very nice thing about this workflow that you're showing now is that your buddy, the drummer, or the guy that you're sending the drums to might not even be in Pro Tools, right? He might use Logic or something else. And exporting the selected tracks as a new session also allows you to export them as an AEF, right?
Right. Exactly right, which we talked about in another episode. Okay, so we've got down here, and it conveniently stuck them all down here, and you can see here that the Vox sub is now inactive, but it's not hidden. The string subs and the effects are all hidden or inactive, but not hidden. And here are are the tracks that I had bounced, right? And if I wanted to, I could consolidate them so they're all the same length, but I don't need to. Now, I want these tracks, plus he's going to be mixing on my drums, so I'll go ahead, boom, 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 boom. And do we want to keep the sub? Yeah, why not? Okay, so those tracks, so all of these drum tracks, plus these three, that's all I want to send them. So these are renders of what I have here, and then what I've got here. Now, there's two different ways that you can do this. They both get you to the same place. One is when you export selected tracks as new session, okay? Or you can do save copy in. They both get you to the same place. And basically, when you go to save copy in, just click selected tracks only. Okay, That's exactly the same as going to export selected tracks as new session. It still is the save copy. It just has checked that box for it.
Okay, so it's two different menu items, but it gets you to the same window.
It gets you to the exact same place. There's no different. So then I'm going to go here, and Dave, you're my customer still. You want broadcast wave, I assume?
I do, because I got chastised for saying I wanted AFs before. So I'm not going there. I'm not going there again. Yeah, 96K, please, and then 32-bit float. Thank you.
Okay. Interleaved or not?
Absolutely. No. You can untick interleaved. I'll take multi-mono.
All right. And main playlist only, it's not really an issue here, but you can choose whether or not alternate playlists of those tracks. There's no tracks, I think, here that have alternate playlists that I have selected. But if you want to, you can have main playlist only. And this is and notice here that audio files is grayed out because I've changed the sample rate. But if I didn't, hold on a second.
I think you're in 48K. Yeah.
There we go. If you don't change the sample rate, then this is something you could not check if you didn't want to. Make sure to check this, right? Make sure to check audio files. If not, you're going to save the session file, but none of the goodies. And then you can convert them to whatever. I'm going to change this back to 96,
yeah,
so it'll do this thing. Right there you go. Don't copy rendered elastic audio files. You can choose not to copy those. It might, if you have a lot of rendered audio files, it might make it a little bit quicker. You don't lose anything because it would re-render it on the receiving end. But again, it's not a big deal over here. I'll go ahead and do this. And now what you're going to see is something very similar to what you would see during a normal save copy in. And I'll go here to the desktop and make a new folder. Here we go. Boom. Boom. And it's now going to convert the audio. It's going to take a little bit more time because it's converting the sample rate. But then Dave's going to get a session that only has those selected tracks, which makes, then basically he imports session data, pulls down everything, and you're done.
Great.
Yeah, or I mean, if he's starting from scratch, he could just open that session, of course, because it'd be a session with only these tracks in.
That's right.
Yeah. Great workflow.
So that covers all of our main talking points, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you skipped ahead here a bit, Andy, because you were mentioning a technique here where you committed the aux of something. And one way to do this, of course, if you want to send your drums with effects and don't want to send all of the tracks individually, you could just have committed the drum sub and then exported that audio file. That would have given you all of the drums summed as one unit and ready to go without any edits, without any effects to add.
Right. It all comes down to whether or not because usually I'm sending a session because I want them to do something, right? So sending something like this is usually the way I want to go, so they can work on the source media and they can pull out other things and they can do trimming and all that stuff. But yeah, you're 100% right.
Well, and this whole thing is based on the fact that you want to send multiple tracks. So are they wanting to mix those? We don't, you never know. They just might want to play to it. So you could just render the drum sub and just send them a 2-track version of the drums.
You could completely do that. Completely do that. I just did a little bit of mix and match in here because just to show that you've got all the flexibility in the world. And I'll show you what the session is when I'm done here.
And this is why our videos are always an hour long, because there's so many ways to do things. And we're trying to cover a lot of bases for different scenarios, for different people.
And you keep insisting getting 96K files.
Maintain the quality, Anders. Maintain the quality.
I'd go for the same session next time.
Why do I get the feeling that Anders is now going to be requiring 192K files?
Yeah.
I would like to do that show, by the way, because you were talking about using 192 for orchestral stuff. I'd be interested to have that conversation.
And so what you're going to get, what the person on the receiving end is going to get is either a session file or, as Anders said, an AAF file that only has those selected tracks. And it does a couple things. First of all, it keeps the download size as low as you can get away with. The second thing is it removes all the distracting parts. So sometimes having 100 tracks, is a little bit hard for somebody to manage. And then third, if you're Anders, you don't want to share.
Anders has got a lot of secret sauce.
I can also say another advantage, and you might not think that this is a huge deal, but if you are committing inside of Pro Tools first, you will duplicate those tracks, right? And that might not be a huge deal if you only have 50 tracks in your session. But if you're on the edge of what your system can do, if you're doing a gigantic post project or you're doing like recording of an orchestra or something, that might be doubling like the 300 or 400 tracks you already have, which might have huge implications. So taking these tracks, selecting them, and then splitting them off as a new session might be the best and fastest workflow.
Yep, no, completely. I completely agree. I mean, sometimes I'll do this when collaborating with myself, just to I'll do a save as, but then I'll do a save copy, removing other tracks, just so I can start the next phase of my production with as few tracks as I can kind of get away with.
Totally, I do that all the time.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, we can wrap that up there then, I think, unless there's anything absolutely pressing. Any more sugar cubes that you want to dump in?
Well, the only thing that we could show, if you wanted to, is show a freeze of an aux track where you can see the audio file in there, because I know you like that.
Yeah, I do.
All right,
and that can
Instantly
also
cool.
be exported as
which can also be exported. That's exactly right.
But it can't be unfrozen if you don't include the contributing tracks, right?
That's right. Well, it can be unfrozen, but you'll lose it.
Yeah. I love that feature, just that you can render.
It just looks so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's so unbearably cool. All right, so we can jump back into it. Yeah, we can show one other thing, Dave, and I know you like this. It's freezing a track, an aux track, and showing the audio in there. It's not really related to what we're talking about here, but it is undeniably cool. So let me show you my session. So here's my vocal tracks, and they're going to the subgroup like we had before. And what I'll do here is I'll hit the freeze button, and it's going to render a little bit faster because it doesn't have to convert the sample rate to 96K. Dave,
I'm unapologetic, and neither is Sadie. Sadie agrees as well.
Oh, schmoopy boop boopy. I remember when I first saw this, I think I screamed and giggled like a little girl. So now this is frozen, which means you can't edit it. But look inside there. There's an audio clip. You could actually see the sum of all of these tracks in there, and there's your render. Same thing with MIDI tracks, instrument tracks, where you render that out and you can see the MIDI notes and you can see the resultant audio. It's amazing.
And that gets rendered into the rendered audio files folder, right?
That's right. It goes into the rendered audio files. By the way, could you include a frozen track in this workflow that we talked about? Absolutely. Right. The only thing is, if you don't have the source tracks, don't unfreeze it, because if it unfreezes, it just becomes an empty audio aux track again. But yeah, I could.
You can also do the same thing with the reverb track or delay track, which is all equally cool.
Yeah.
Yep. So any of those aux tracks or instrument tracks that you want to share, you can just go ahead and freeze them, and then select the tracks and export them. You don't have to commit it. Not at all.
But I think you're also mentioning something that's really worth mentioning here, and that is, if you have no clue what your friend has in plugins, you could freeze your track before sending them to him, and that will include all of the effects that he might not have. If he has them, he can still unfreeze them individually and be able to tweak the settings there. But that's also one way to make sure that he gets them sounding the way that you have thought of them to be sounding.
Yeah, right. And having all of those conversations before you do all of this would really help.
Super important.
Yeah.
Okay. Great stuff. Some really, really clever ways of doing a seemingly simple thing, but as we find out every day working in audio, that everyone's different. Some situations can require slightly different ways of doing things to make things slightly easier for people. And we've got a really clever app that allows us to do that. Aren't we lucky?
We are. We're fortunate.
All it leaves me to say is thank you very much to Anders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Andy.
You bet. And congratulations to Anders for clearing quarantine down there in Doha.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to get out of this hotel room here, go out into the sun.
Have fun. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you at the next one. My name's Dave. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we're out.